What's going on, boys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of Eating Shit. As you can see, if you're watching the video, this setup is possibly worse than the last one for right now. But we got the sign lit up for the first time. Shout out to Josh for making me that like 6 months ago. Still haven't got it on the wall, but we're getting close. You know, we're sitting on this table right now, but good enough. So we're in the new room at the office over here. So to my left, this wall is going to be looking absolutely fucking ridiculous for the Go to Bed podcast. And then my thought is I can just turn the camera how it is right now and have like a solo setup over here that will look slightly less ridiculous for this podcast. But anyway, still looks ghetto. Maybe worse than no setup at all, but a couple weeks, it'll be looking better. Anyway, lessons this week. So something I got this week was I ran the meetup as I do once a month here in Reno, just a local real estate investor meetup. And I was talking to some guys afterwards, and this one dude that's been coming forever, but definitely has like really, really bad analysis paralysis. He was in the group, and you know, one of the questions, or I guess just like sentiments that I hear a lot, and you know, just watching videos about real estate, it's not just here, but that's one thing about real estate is like it's hyper localized. So like, you know, a lot of videos that I see online, it's like the US housing market is about to crash, or the US housing market this, and it's like you can't look at it like that. I mean, the markets, like even city to city, act differently. So I can only speak on, you know, since we only operate locally here, really just like the Reno area market. So obviously we track all those metrics pretty closely. And but either way, something that I hear a lot is like, you know, the housing market is going to crash because the prices are so expensive, and like who can afford the house with this price, or who can afford the house with this interest rate. And I think a lot of that is just like, it's all relative. Like when you've been in a market for a long time, like, you know, people that grew up here or they've been here for 10 years or whatever, that's how I think of it, at least, because like I was becoming an adult when the downturn was happening. So like 09, I graduated high school, and then like 10, 11, 12 is when I'm starting to like, oh, like how much does a house cost? And so you see these houses that are like cookie cutter, 3.2s, out in like Stead or something. And back then they're like $100,000, like 105. And so when I started like realizing anything about housing and looking, you know, I'm like, oh, a house costs 100,000. Fast forward to today, the same house is 400,000. So yeah, like when you look at it like that, it's like this house is too expensive. Like this is way more expensive than it quote should be. So I think a lot of people look at that, but it's all relative, because like if you went to like, if I up and moved to Birmingham, Alabama right now, I would be like, man, these houses are so cheap. And probably the people that live there, they're like, I remember when you could buy this one for 30,000, and now it's like 80 or whatever. And I think it's dirt cheap for like a decent house or whatever. It's all relative, but either way, people just think in this way of like, whatever their base is, like can't be wrong for some reason. And I was telling these guys earlier this year, I kind of caught myself in that same thinking like that, where I'm like, you know, how are people still buying houses? Like when the market didn't crash as bad as we thought it did, and it's like Q1, it's just like stable, but the rates are still at 7. It's like, who can afford this? Like what's going on here? And I just randomly like Googled like median household income for Reno. And I looked at a couple of different sources, like median, average, all that shit. And something that I didn't realize was how much higher the household income has gotten in this area. And again, it's just like you see the stat one time and then you think it's just set in stone. Like, oh, people in Reno make 54,000 a year. And then this other stuff that I'm looking at, you know, it's like high 60s, mid 70s for average. Fuck, the AC just kicked on. Hopefully that doesn't fuck up the audio too bad. But you know, the average income like way up to like 90,000, because you have like all the high earners pulling that up. But either way, every stat that I looked at was way more than I thought it was. And then you kind of do the math on it. It's like, oh wait, like this actually somewhat makes sense. Like the housing prices are still a little high, but there's definitely way more people than I thought that can afford like a starter home in this area. So like kind of answered my own question, like who the fuck can afford all this? It's like, well, a lot of people, and a lot more people than I thought, because I just didn't realize how much the income had actually crept up in this area. And kind of had to set the stage for like what we were talking about, because I went through that scenario with them, and this guy responded with like, he was like, wait, how much was it, and was that household or like single income? I was like, it was household. And he was like kind of relieved, and he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I used like 75,000 when I talked to them. He's like, oh, I just thought that, I should be making 75,000 by myself. And he was like relieved that the average household income was 75K in the area. And like I cut him off and I talked to him, because I've talked to this guy for many, many times, like after meetups and stuff, about like mindset and stuff, because he's just like so scared to do anything. Like he's just like hanging on to this bit of money he has and like can't take any action. And I was like, dude, that's such a shitty mindset. Like comparing yourself to the average, if you're going to play the comparison game, which we've talked about on here before, like at least compare yourself to fucking super high earners or something, but not like, oh, like people make 75 grand, so that's what I should be making. I was like, no, dude, like you should be making whatever you want to make, not fucking 75 grand just because you thought that was the average single income for a split second. So, I was thinking about that a little bit more, and like really there's three attributes to, I don't know if it's like success, but it's definitely like a mindset thing, but mindset is the first attribute. So anyway, like mindset, just having that, like whatever that switch is that clicks at some point for some people. Like some people have it instilled in them when they're super young, by their parents or whatever, and then others like figure it out along the way. But basically for him, hopefully I flipped that switch for him. I thought I had done that a long time ago, but apparently not. But really it's just like that switch of like, oh, there's more out there, like I can get more, I want more. That's kind of like the first step. And then the second step, that I think a lot of people miss out on, is you have to have like a little bit of faith to fucking do anything. Like you can apply this to people doing huge things or just doing like your first deal. And the example, I just wrote a blog post on this, and like the example I used in there was my first deal. I was like, I got the mindset that, I want to do more. I don't want like the average, whatever that amount is, like it doesn't matter. I don't want that. I want more for myself. The second step is having a little bit of faith, or like another way to put it would be self-belief, that you can go do whatever it is that you want to do. And I'm not saying like, oh, you fucking are right out of high school and you're like, I have the self-belief that I can be Elon Musk. I'm like, cool. Okay. That's not really what I'm talking about. I think a lot of people, they have a trick like that switch, like, yeah, I want more, but it's always, but they don't have any faith in themselves or any self-belief at all about whatever it is that they're doing. So, I use the example of my first deal. I'm like, I had the switch. It was like, okay, I want to do this. And I had the faith that I could do that first deal. And I think that step 3 is confidence, but we'll get into that in a second. A lot of people miss that self-belief because it's not like I knew I could do it, because you don't. Like, you think you can do it. That's it. That's all the faith part is. I did not know that I could like successfully wholesale a deal, but I thought I could do it. And that was the difference there. The third step is the confidence. And the confidence is kind of like a form, or like, I guess faith is a form of confidence, just like a little bit of confidence in yourself. But when I'm saying confidence, like, confidence comes from doing the things that you actually like tell yourself that you're going to do, and then you follow through with it. And then also from the reps that it takes by, doing those things over and over and over again. So it's a much different thing right now. Like right now, do I know I can do like a wholesale deal or flip? It's like, yeah, I know, but now I know. But before, I just thought. I didn't actually know until I did it. And then even after I did it, you're only a little bit more confident on that second deal, third deal, fourth deal. Now it's like we've done the shit however many times. like I know that I can do it. Like I'm confident that we can do another deal. Like when we contract something, like there's not like, oh, I hope we can figure out how to do this. Like if the numbers are what we think it is, I know that we can execute on that. But then I'll go back to step two, once we do like a bigger deal or like how to do X amount of deals per year. It's like, I don't know that for sure, but I just think that I can do it. And then you prove it to yourself and then you go to the next level. So just think about that a little bit with that guy, and then trying to break it down into like, the actionable 3 steps there so you guys can do with that what you will. Before I go on to issues, let me think if there's anything more that I wanted to touch on that. That's basically it. It's just like pretty simple. In the blog post I use the generic, like everyone's heard that quote from Henry Ford that's like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That's like the faith part. And I think that, there's definitely people out there that are not driven and they just like don't care to do more. But I think for the most part, probably most people would want to do more. But I think on average, they kind of like trick themselves into doing less or just like settling. I think that most people, they'll get their first bit of like being comfortable. And then it's from there, it's like, oh, well, this is pretty good, which is fucking not. Like, no matter which way you look at it, it's like not good. And then it's like, well, I would do more, but XYZ excuse. And they kind of trick themselves into like just settling and just living the rest of their life on autopilot. And I wish more people would just like have that first switch of like, yeah, I want more. And then just like that little bit of self-belief to actually go try and do something. Because if they don't have that self-belief part, they end up not trying at all. And then you definitely cannot get the confidence to like do big shit. And I think that's like a pretty solid order of thinking about mindset like that. And I'll also add that like mindset is not like, I'm always working on my mindset every single day. So it's not like you flip a switch and then all of a sudden you have this like insane mindset that you can do great things with. It's like ongoing, but it does certainly start with like that first switch of, oh, I'm gonna do more. I want more for myself. So issues this week. This week was pretty mellow as far as issues goes compared to what it has been lately, which is a great thing. I think the biggest issues that we had this week as far as like business goes, I'm not going to get into too much detail because it's like an ongoing deal. It's not closed yet, but there's this deal that we're working on, and basically never once we handle this objection with sellers all the time when we go direct to seller for the wholesaling and flipping business. A lot of times, sellers are like, oh, well, my tenant's going to buy the place for, oh, my fucking friend or my whatever grandma's going to buy the place from me. Never one time have I ever seen anyone that said that, the person that they had in mind actually pull it off, because like they end up talking to their neighbor like one time. And the neighbor's like, oh, let me know when you want to sell. Like, I'll buy this from you. And then they think that that's like a good enough reason to not sell the house to someone who can actually buy it. They're like, now they're obligated to like go down this path from a 2-second conversation 8 months ago with the neighbor of like, oh, I'll buy it from you. I got cash. Like they have no clue. And then every single time that has happened and we can't like overcome it and get them to sign, they want to pursue this path and it never works out because like it's just not realistic on average that it's even going to be a viable option for whoever. So a little bit different situation here. This one has a tenant, and one of the reasons that the seller even wants to sell this place is because the tenant's not fucking paying. And then, we have to now deal with the tenant and stuff. So the tenant wants to buy it from us. And the type of property that this is, like it's very, very low price point. And he kind of like, he asked us, the tenant I'm talking about, not the seller, the tenant asked us if he could buy it from us. And we're like, well, basically maybe, if you can pull it off, but like, we were already thinking like it's not super likely that that's going to happen, but because of what this is, maybe it could happen. And you kind of feel bad because like you want to help the people out, but we know like over and over and over again, this never works out. And so we basically gave him like a week to get his loan like totally approved. And we were very clear about that. The week comes and he has like barely submitted for it. So already it's like not what we were talking about. We gave him almost an extra week and it's still like not even close. And it's never going to be close. But now he's like reaching out to like family members and friends and he thinks he can pull it off. So now we're in this weird spot where it's like we should have just stuck to the process. I do this podcast and say stick to the process all the time, then we don't fucking stick to the process and it bites us in the ass all the time. But we should have just said no up front and done what we were going to do. And then we wouldn't be in this issue now. And now the issue is going to become over the next few weeks that it's like he's going to keep trying to do this and it's not going to work. And time is going to be like running out basically. And now we're going to get down to it and it's going to be like a time crunch where we're going to have to extend the deal because he has not been like actively trying to move out. He's been actively trying to buy the place, which is never going to happen. So it is what it is. We'll deal with it as it comes, I guess. But that was really like, I was sitting here thinking before I started recording, like what big issues did we have this week? There was no dog fights. There was no, having to obtain IDs for people because they don't have them. Yeah, it was pretty mellow as far as issues goes, but this is like, we did have to deal with this one pretty much every day, at least a little bit. And now I think it's going to become probably a bigger issue and especially a bigger issue than what it needed to be in the first place. As far as wins goes this week, we closed 2 deals and then we contracted 3 more. So that's good. Always trying to get more consistency in the volume. So overall, I was just looking at the numbers late Friday night after everyone was gone, like 8 p.m. I looked at kind of like the year-to-date numbers. I guess this is kind of like wins too, but yeah, basically we've taken 49 contracts on the year, and I think even with our debacle in Alabama where we had to give tons of the deals back, our fallout rate is still 29%, which is pretty good with considering all of that because we shoot for like 25% or higher. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm meaning that we should be like contracting deals and closing over 75% of them. Some of them are never going to close because of like title issues and stuff like that. So like even in the Alabama ones, most of them we had to give back because we couldn't sell them because the deals like weren't good enough. Here we don't really have that problem unless we're like super wrong about something or something comes up in inspections and you can't renegotiate it because of the debt amount or whatever. But here we know the market well enough that like very certain if we contract something we will be able to close it. Whether we close it or whether we wholesale it or whatever, like it's really not a worry. But sometimes in Alabama and here as well, you have like title issues that come up. Like you contract something and then as soon as we open up escrow, they're like, we can't insure this because whatever. Like we have one right now that's we just extended it for like 240 days, a piece of dirt out instead. And we have to take it through this quiet title action, whatever. But so that one doesn't count towards the fallout rate, but things like that are a big reason why, you shouldn't expect to have like a 0% fallout rate. Like things happen, but that's how we kind of estimate how much volume we're going to do as far as revenue goes when it's like we want to lock up X amount of projected profit per month, which means we're going to close like over 75% of that. And that's what the actual revenue is going to be. So even with all of these deals in Alabama that didn't go the way we wanted, year to date, our fallout rate is 29%, which is pretty good. And then, 49 contracts, that means we're at the end of month 7. So that's like 7 per month on average. And then the last few months have been, pretty good, as far as that goes. So that's kind of where I want the volume to be right now, at least like 8 to 10 a month contracted and then going up from there. So that's all good stuff. It's good to look back at that and again, talking, I think a few episodes ago, we talked about like the gap and the gain and taking a minute and celebrating your wins instead of just like on to the next thing and everything's on fire all the time. Like that's way, way more than we used to do, or, it's the best that the volume's ever been. So all good there. And then last win, we are actively interviewing for a disposition manager right now. So that's what I've been doing for like the last year, is basically only doing dispo and other like leadership type stuff. So we're interviewing for that right now. Had a couple of good interviews this week. I'm going to be getting some more next week. Hopefully we'll get the right person in here. And then the rest of the year is going to be spent training that person. I know that role is going to be super hard to train, not because it's super complex or anything, but just because like the disposition manager, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're not familiar with like a wholesale model, if you contract something, that's acquisitions, and then dispositions is, selling the deal to another buyer or whatever. And with that, it's so relationship based. Some of these buyers are like the buyers that I've done my first ever deals with, like way like 5.5 years ago, and then others are brand new that we've never done a deal with yet, and everywhere in between. So it's going to be very hard to like, for some of these guys to try to like pass off a relationship. Not that I'm passing off the relationship, like don't ever talk to me again, but it's just like when we have a deal, they need to, when we have a deal that we're going to wholesale, like they need to talk to the disposition manager now and not me. And I just know that's going to be very, very difficult when they see a deal from our company, that people don't pick up the phone and just call me and even know someone else is listed as the disposition manager. So it's going to be a lot of like introducing the new guy to all these people and, just trying to figure out how to do that transition, I guess. We'll see how it goes, but I'm not expecting it to be like, oh, in 2 weeks, like you're trained up and you're on your own. It's going to be like probably the rest of the year, it kind of like half and half, like splitting it with the new guy. As far as like, I'm still going to have, he might be doing everything, but I'm still going to have to be there as just like kind of a pass off type thing. So all good stuff. That's going to be one more seat that's, delegated, and then on to the next to build the company the way we want it to. So that's about it for this episode. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll see you on the next one.